If you're a freelancer or a small business owner who needs a desktop that just works, no crazy configuration menus, no surprise crashes, and no monthly upgrades that drain the budget, then you're probably feeling the same hesitation most of us have when we reach for a new workstation. The last thing you want is to spend a few $100s and end up with a box that sounds great on paper but turns out to be a daily headache. You're looking for something reliable, easy to live with, and worth every penny you put into it, not just a list of flashy specs that sound impressive in a showroom. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In this review, I'll walk through exactly how the HP Z2G9 workstation performs in the real world, who should consider it, and who might be better off looking elsewhere. First off, let's talk about what the Z2G9 actually means for day-to-day work. It's built around a 14th Gen Intel Core i7-14700, which is a solid step up from the older generation chips you might still see in many budget builds. In practice, that translates to smooth multitasking when you're juggling things like Adobe Photoshop, a couple of virtual machines, and a browser full of tabs. I ran a quick test on my own setup, opened a large 30-minute video in DaVinci Resolve, switched over to a spreadsheet with live data, and kept a Zoom call going. The system never stuttered, and even the background rendering in Resolve stayed on track. That's the kind of confidence you want when you're paying clients on a deadline. You can keep all those apps open without worrying that one will hog the CPU and slow everything else down. The 16GB of RAM paired with the 512GB SSD also feels pretty balanced for most professional workloads. The SSD speed means that launching any of those heavy programs is nearly instantaneous, and you'll notice the difference when you're moving large project files around. For example, I copied a 2GB Photoshop file to the drive and it was done in under 10 seconds, no more waiting for the spinning drive to spin up. The 512GB capacity isn't endless, but for a workstation aimed at creators who typically store raw footage or large datasets on external NAS or cloud storage, it's a reasonable sweet spot. You get enough space for your OS applications and a few active project folders without needing to upgrade right away. Now, let's address the hidden trade-offs. The power supply is a 700W unit, which on the surface sounds generous, and it is enough to handle the i7 and a mid-range GPU if you decide to add one later. However, the system does not come with a dedicated graphics card out of the box, which is something to be aware of if your work involves heavy 3D rendering or AI-powered tasks. The lack of a GPU isn't a deal-breaker for most Office-type workloads or 2D design work, but it does mean you'll need to budget extra if you need that extra visual horsepower. Also, the Ethernet port tops out at 10 Mbps, enough for most typical office internet speeds, but not ideal if you have a gigabit network and want to shave seconds off large file transfers. In a home lab where you're moving terabytes over the local network, that could become a noticeable bottleneck. Another practical point is the size and expandability. The Z2G9 keeps a tower form factor that's slimmer than older workstation chassis, which makes it fit under a standing desk or into tighter office spaces. The downside is that you'll have fewer drive bays compared to a full-size tower, so if you plan on stacking multiple SSDs or adding a large HDD array for backup, you'll need to look at external solutions or a different chassis. That said, the interior layout is still well organized, with enough room for a basic aftermarket GPU and a couple of RAM sticks, so you're not locked into the exact configuration it ships with. Who should buy this machine? If you're a graphic designer, video editor, or data analyst who needs consistent performance for multi-app workflows, the Z2G9 hits the sweet spot. Its 14th Gen i7 offers enough cores to keep modern software responsive, while the 16GB of memory and fast SSD keep your daily tasks snappy. The Windows 11 Pro OS also adds useful business-oriented features like BitLocker encryption and remote desktop capabilities, which can be a plus if you're managing a small team or need secure remote access. It's a solid base for anyone who wants a plug-and-play workstation that will last a few years without requiring a major upgrade. On the flip side, if you're a 3D artist whose pipeline relies heavily on GPU-accelerated rendering, or a machine learning researcher needing a high-end GPU and a lot of VRAM, the lack of a pre-installed graphics card makes the Z2G9 a less optimal starting point. You'd be spending additional money on a GPU and possibly a higher capacity power supply, which could push the total cost close to the price of a pre-built workstation that already includes those components. Similarly, if you're planning to